Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us here this morning in person, and to everybody who's also joining us online for the launch of We Are Generation Rent, which is the sixth of Threshold's annual tenant sentiment surveys. My name is Anne-Marie O'Reilly. I'm the National Advocacy Manager with Threshold. I'll be the MC today, but I'm not going to delay. I'm going to hand straight over to Minister Darragh O'Brien, who has come here today to launch the report for us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. Good morning, everyone. Look, it's a real pleasure to be here today. We're joined earlier on by my colleague MEP Barry Andrews and by the leader of the Labour Party, Ivana Bacik. And just firstly, if I could commend Threshold and Anne-Marie, yourself and the team, and John Mark for carrying out this really important research. I've done my best to be available to Threshold at the launch of these reports over the last number of years, because the work that Threshold do in relation to tenant advocacy, in relation to policy advice as well, and proposed changes in policy too, I've found to me to be extremely helpful, very informative, and a very collaborative approach. Critical too, and that's good. And that's how we can change policy and make sure that we get better outcomes for people. I think the survey itself is very telling. As I was discussing with colleagues earlier on, there's no question that there still remains very significant difficulties in the private rental market in particular. So to carry out an extensive survey such as this, carry out such an extensive survey such as this in relation to sentiment around renters in particular is really, really important. And I might touch on a few of the main items now shortly, but to just give you an overview of the situation right now, as all of you will know, the government brought forward the Housing for All plan. It's in place just over a year now. Last year was the first full year of that, and whilst many challenges remain, the overall issue of actually increasing supply, both good social, good affordable, and indeed, yes, private homes, last year was a good start. We delivered about 30,000 new homes this last year in 2022, 5,000 above our target. I intend that we will exceed our target this year as well. So progress is being made in relation to the delivery of social homes. We built more new social homes last year than we've done since 1975. We've brought forward cost rental, which I know Threshold are a big supporter of. Cost rental didn't exist in Ireland 18 months ago. We've over 1,000 tenancies approved, and I want to ramp that up significantly more. That's why I got approval just a few weeks ago from Cabinet to make changes to cost rental and to bring forward a viability measure, which I believe can unlock quite a significant amount of additional properties, particularly in apartments within our cities, that can long-term secure state-backed affordable rents. So we're looking at, in that space, a minimum 25% below market. The average is about 35% below market. And I've had the pleasure of meeting a lot of new cost rental tenants there, and the security that it gives them to know that they're not going to get a letter in the post, that the landlord's not going to sell, that they can set down their roots there as well in those areas. And we will expand that further this year on cost rental delivery, and we've legislated for it under the Affordable Housing Act as well. Secondly, interestingly, in the survey, where you see just 1 in 5 tenants are actually renting by choice, and that actually shows you that, you know, the challenges that we have there. About 60% of tenants who are renting want to be able to buy a home, and that's why I brought forward a new change in relation to helping people buy their first home through the First Home Scheme. And we've had many tenants actually now being able to bridge the gap between the finance that they have and the finance that they need by using the First Home Scheme to buy their homes, and also accessing the Help to Buy grant, €30,000 of your own tax back to help with the deposit. Whilst that's happening, you know, we need obviously to continue that progress and to ramp that up further. We need to make sure that tenants' rights are further protected. So we extended the notice to quit periods as well, brought forward the tenancies of a definite duration also, and we're looking very closely in dealing with the European Commission as well about the whole issue of the short-term letting market here in Ireland. We've the legislation produced. The Commission have had some comments on that, and I've engaged directly with Commissioner Schmidt on that, and I know Threshold have been very helpful in that space. Like, we need a functioning private rental market, and it doesn't function as it should do right now. It's not secure for many tenancies right across the country, and in many instances it's not affordable, and we see that as well in the survey. That's why we brought forward the measure in the budget last year of the renters tax credit, And that's worth €1,000 to every renter this year, because it's 22 and 23 tax credit this year. And many still have not applied for it, and I just use the opportunity today to encourage people to do that. That is a real cost-saving measure, and strengthening the rent pressure zones. When I came in, with 4% rent increases were permitted. It's 2% now, and we're going to be publishing very shortly, and I know I'll be asking Threshold to be central to the stakeholder engagement on the rental market review, which is a forward-looking look. So what should rent in Ireland look like? Right at the moment, there is a large degree of firefighting, and I get that. I'm looking forward to listening to Sarah on her own experience as a renter, and many renters live in a very precarious situation. As Minister for Housing, I'm absolutely acutely aware of that. I'm doing everything I can to bring about improvements in that space. So I just want to conclude by saying to thank the team in Threshold who've carried out this really, really important piece of work in relation to generation rent. It's a very significant report. I can assure you I'll assess it in detail. It will inform further policy changes that I will be making, and we'll be moving forward further the rental tenancy changes in the future also. So just to commend you on the work that you do every single day of the week in relation to supporting tenants, providing advice for tenants, knowing the tenants can own their rights too, and we support those campaigns too in relation to making sure that people out there know what their rights are. So thank you so much for the invitation to speak to you here this morning, both those who are here in person and those who are virtually looking in here today. And I just want to conclude by saying Threshold can be absolutely assured of my continuing support in a real tangible way by providing the financial resources that you need to be able to expand the advocacy services that you have. If I could, and this is genuinely in conclusion, I want to thank John Mark in particular for the work that you do as well in helping us in relation to the National Homeless Action Committee. You've been an invaluable member of that committee that I chair at a very difficult time for many people, because I think with all of the issues we have in housing, the single biggest area of priority are those who don't have a home at all. And I'm acutely aware of that too. And that's why we need to continue to see that increase in good social housing for people, because I believe in public housing. We've managed to bring about a step change in the delivery in housing in a short space of time. It's not enough for many people, but we will see further progress this year leading on. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here, Anne-Marie, and congratulations to all who've worked on this really important piece of work and this really important survey in relation to generation rent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minister. And it's great to hear of your commitment to public housing. And I suppose it's quite clear in the report that Threshold sees the increase in social affordable cost rental as really key in transforming housing for everybody in the country, and particularly to meet the needs of those who are renting and who are struggling in that way. And yes, we certainly recognise all that you have done so far in relation to our policy requests and recommendations, the changes to the RPZ rules, even the limiting of the deposits to the equivalent of 1 month's rent, and the commitment in Housing for All to look at a deposit protection scheme. And obviously the Commission is also examining the issue of the right to housing, which is also central to Threshold's policies and our values. And of course then action being taken in regards to short-term lets, which is something Threshold has campaigned for a long time, and the bill was brought forward. So now it's a case of us moving Europe along in that respect as well, to bring those homes back into use. And so we really do appreciate you being here, but also for recognising our work and taking on board our policy recommendations as well. So I'll hand over now to Gareth Redmond. Gareth is our Research and Policy Officer who worked on writing up the report and is going to present the main findings to you here this morning. So thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Gareth, and I'm the Research and Policy Officer for Threshold. So many researchers are not known for being particularly succinct, but my goal today is to actually condense this annual report into a 10 or so minute presentation. So I'll do my best at that. So the purpose of this annual survey is to give voice to the experiences of Threshold's clients, what is known as generation rent. The phrase itself is generally used to capture a broad range of inequalities in access to housing, securing employment, and welfare support among younger households. However, the concept of generation rent is no longer theoretical and does not necessarily apply to people who are just in their 20s. As part of this continued long-term experience, generation rent are now in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and even approaching retirement age. This ultimately may have laid a delay to starting a family. They may have experienced homelessness, been unable to accumulate savings for an unexpected yet necessary expense, had to couch surf, or move house on a regular basis as security of home becomes a distant dream, and may even have to have reluctantly moved abroad. So Thresholds is concerned for the well-being and the prospects of those renting long-term. The lack of security and the ever-growing rent burden, both features of the Irish private rented sector, have lifelong consequences. These people and those who have been coined also generations stuck at home are the people whose voices we want to amplify today. So the analysis of this data is presented under several headings, as you can see. The first one is aspirations and expectations. The next one is experiences of renting, which the presentation includes private renters' feeling of security, the difficulty of finding a place to rent, the length of time renting in the private rental market, and the increasing amount of these renters are going to have to pay to stay in their homes, and also how long they have been renting for. The analysis then goes on to examine HAP and the rent supplement, as well as poor standards and overcrowding in the home. There are other sections in this presentation but I will not cover, but are covered in the report. Examples includes detailing the impact of COVID-19 on private renters' experience of the rental tax credit, and the reason why some renters have moved back into the family or parental home. This year also contains a new section with respondents' descriptions of what would make renting better for them. And this presentation will highlight renters' wishes word for word. And the presentation will finally finish with a set of policy recommendations. So the first section regarding aspirations and expectations. For those who are surveyed, renting is clearly not their tenure of choice. This is demonstrated by the fact that only 9% wish to be renting in 5 years' time, whereas 61% would prefer to own their own home and 17% would like to move into social housing. In comparison, very few of those surveys expect to realize their expectation of home ownership in that period. Nearly 40% expect that they will own their own home in 5 years' time, 15% expect to have social housing, and despite it not being the preferred tenure of choice, just over 30% expect that they'll be renting in 5 years' time. So regarding feelings of security, when we asked the respondents, how secure do you feel that you can stay renting in your current home for as long as you want? Nearly half felt insecure, nearly a quarter felt neither secure or insecure, and just shy of 20% felt secure. This is in sharp contrast to our 2021 survey, where nearly half said they felt secure in their property. In last year's survey, half of those who responded felt insecure in their home, and this feeling of insecurity has been sustained in this year's data. And with this year, only 18% felt secure in their homes this year, and this is a significant drop from last year, where nearly 40% felt secure in their rented accommodation. In the second kind of graph there, in last year's survey, one-parent families were more likely than any other group to report feeling insecure in their tenancy. This year's story is remarkably different, with every family type experiencing comparable feelings of insecurity. So regarding finding a home to rent, this year, nearly 3/4 said it was extremely difficult to find a home to rent, and 14% said they found it difficult. Only 3% found it easy to find accommodation. And I want to take a minute just to outline some of the comments left by the respondents to describe how challenging it is for people to access a property in the private rental market. First quote, "It took us 4 or 5 months to find an apartment." And this was a male who was roughly around my age in their late 20s, was earning between 45 and 55,000 a year and was in full-time employment. There was no houses advertised for rent in the area. We have found that houses are found mainly word of mouth and off the books. So if they're not secure and typically in poor condition, there are certainly no rentals being offered within HAP limits, even with an uplift. The last quote, "It was the most stressful time of my life. We had to move 15 miles away from where we had lived all our lives. Huge change." But there's one particular comment that sticks out that really paints a picture of the challenges people face when they're looking for a new home. There should be an impossible option there too. And notably, just in terms of kind of the difficulties of those who are vulnerable, this was a social welfare recipient and also a one-parent family. And this difficulty in finding a home to rent was felt across all groups, regardless of age, income, length, and time renting, or family size. So in terms of the length of time rating, as illustrated in the chart on the screen, those who participated in the survey were seasoned renters, with half of them living in the rental sector for more than 10 years. This increased to 63% when accounting for those who've been renting in the private rental sector for 6 or more years. However, only just over 10% have lived in their current home for 10 years or more, and 1 in 5 have had their current home for 2 years or less. This shows that while most respondents have been living in the private rental sector for many years, only a small minority have managed to establish a long-term home. To understand why this is, respondents were asked why they left their last rental home, and to nobody's surprise here, the most common reason was that the landlord was selling the property. So regarding affordability, so those who participated in the survey were asked what percentage of their income they pay on rent using its affordability. Using 30% income to rent affordability measure, just 27% of the clients surveyed they are paying affordable rent. Of those who responded, just over half were paying more than 30% of their income on rent, and almost a fifth of those surveyed were spending half their income on rent. And there was one particular comment that actually really stood out to me. Bills and rent cost 88% of my salary before food. This is a woman who was just under 30, was earning between 40 and 45,000 a year, was in full-time employment, and was a 2-parent household. So regarding the difficulty of HAP and rent supplement, almost a quarter of the participants were in receipt of HAP and 3% were receiving rent supplement. As has been done in previous surveys, we asked a series of questions related to payments and better understanding of recipients' experiences of those payments in the private rental sector. 86% of those respondents in receipt of HAP and all the respondents receiving rent supplement were paying a top-up to their landlord. And these top-up payments range from €50 a month to as much as $1,210 a month. In addition to this, those who are paying a top-up are more likely to struggle paying their bills, buy groceries, pay the rent, with over 3/4, about 77%, stating this to be the case. So, like last year's survey, 6 in 10 respondents stated there were poor standards or outstanding repairs in their home. These include problems with damp, mold, problems with heating systems, faulty showers. Some of the respondents' responses were quite chilling, and some of them here are on the screen. So, majority of those surveyed, about nearly 70%, have reported the problem to the landlord. For 10 people, necessary repairs are made, with only partial or temporary fixes provided for 4. For the remainder, however, the issues were ongoing, with respondents expressing considerable levels of frustration and inability to do anything about the situation. This year, respondents were asked why they hadn't reported any issues to their landlord. We only did get 4 answers to this question, but 3 of those expressed a fear of losing their home or an otherwise penalisation from the landlord. Only about a fifth of those surveys stated that their home was overcrowded. While single people who were sharing with others were more likely to feel the home was overcrowded, many families also experienced overcrowding due to family circumstances. So this year's survey included a question, and I really wanted to highlight this, where the respondents were asked what would make renting better for them. The slides have some of what the respondents had to say. So clear themes emerged from responses. Over half of the respondents referenced the unaffordability of the private rental sector and the lack of supply. Lack of security in renting was a common theme for renters. And another theme was related to tenants living in properties that were beneath the minimum standards. So under these conditions, it can be suggested that tenants are residing rather than living in their homes, viewing this simply as a place to temporarily rest their head. These comments illustrate the emotive toll of private renting. Some of the comments highlight a clear lack of control and a sense of feeling powerless in the tenant-landlord relationship. This completely undermines tenants' ability to create a home and to feel positive connection to where they live. So the last slide. So in terms of recommendations, the solutions that are outlined on this slide, these are just a snapshot of the recommendations that can be read in greater depth in the report. But when I look at these recommendations, I view all of this as part of what's called the onion model. The onion model can be used as a metaphor for a complex structure of policy change. The system is simply split into layers to make it easy to understand. One of the challenges faced with this aspect of theory of change thinking is that when you start thinking about multifaceted approaches needed to address the housing crisis, a lot of ideas and thoughts are generated by many different things, and this can become quickly overwhelming. As part of this conversation, the process is a bit like peeling back the layers of an onion. Each of these layers can then be subdivided, and it takes more questioning, even simple questioning, for example. Why is this? And what is behind this idea? Start getting the deeper, more complex and difficult concepts. And eventually these are uncovered. As part of the solution, there will be discomfort and debate that accompanies sharing these deeper ideas and solutions. And it's often a sign that critical thinking is happening. It can also be suggested there are power issues that are blocking dissenting views and challenging the dominant assumptions of the sector. But if all reasonable views can be explored and negotiated positively, then we can all look afresh at implications for long-term success, which is the creation of a fair and equitable housing system that ensures everyone has a safe, affordable, and accessible home. A safe, secure, and affordable home should not be out of reach. It's very simply a right. And thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a million, Gareth. And yeah, there's quite a lot to cover. There is a good bit in that report from the findings, the stats, but then also the qualitative data, the direct quotes from those who participated, which really communicate to you the lived experience of people who participated in the survey. So I'm going to see, do I need to bring the slide back up? Do I have to do that? No. We're going to ask Sarah to join us now. So Sarah was a client of Thresholds, and she's very kindly agreed to come along today and talk to us about her experience of renting. Hang on, am I? No, I don't have to do anything. Okay, so lovely. I'll ask Sarah to come up to the studio. Thank you.
Hello.
Okay, so first time ever interviewing somebody.
First time being interviewed. That wasn't her job.
Yeah. So I suppose the first question would be is just tell me your story.
Yeah, my name is Sarah. I'm 27 and I have just finished renting. Well, it was a year ago I finished renting. I was renting a 2-bed apartment with my partner at the time. And we moved home about a year ago now, just because we kind of just got sick of the rental market and the conditions compared to the rent that we were paying. And yeah, now I'm living at home with my parents, which is very nice.
So from when I spoke to you last week about your story, one thing that we often find with a lot of Thresholds cases that they're very much multifaceted and have many different aspects, whether it's never just one issue. So kind of, would we be able to kind of talk about that?
The issues, yeah. When we first moved into the apartment, it was freshly renovated, freshly painted. It was really nice. About a month in, we noticed that mold was starting to grow in the windows. And it was quite thick black. It was quite scary. I immediately wanted to contact the estate agent who was acting on behalf of the landlord. And I was told by my partner not to do that because that would be like the end of, we're only here a month, they'll definitely kick us out. And he had about 9 more years experience renting than I did. So I kind of took him at his word and he said, well, this is just normal. Like every property that I've been in has mold, you just kind of have to live with it. When I was chatting to my friends then, you know, they were like, yeah, it is like, we have mold. We just kind of get mold spraying deals and you're good to go. So that kind of became part of our daily cleaning routine. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I decided to contact the estate agent because I found mold was growing inside the pillows when I was changing the bed, and it was like behind the bed frame and stuff, and it was quite daunting. So I contacted the landlord or the estate agent, and their response was that, well, you're obviously not opening the windows. And I was like, I am, like, guarantee that I am. After I told them I was, they said, well, just to remind you, drying clothes inside the apartment is strictly forbidden, or technically forbidden in your lease. So like, remind you again, if that's what you're doing. We were, because they didn't provide a dryer, and you know, it's an extra cost. We're already paying extortionate rent. We're not going to go to dry cleaners every time we need to get our clothes dry. But it wasn't in that room that we were drying the clothes, so it couldn't have been that. But anyway, we just dropped it. I took that as a very light threat that, you know, you are technically breaking your lease by doing so. So
were you in the property for less than 6 months at that time?
Oh yeah, we were there like a month, about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then during that time as well, the paint had started to peel off the wall, and we found that it was a layer of mold. So I don't know, not saying that they painted to cover the mold, but do with that what you will.
And kind of, so apart from standards and repairs, what kind of other issues did you kind of have during your time renting that property?
A few months later, then the heater broke. It was storage heaters in the bedroom, and it was during lockdown, very cold winter. I don't know if everyone remembers, and it was very, very uncomfortable. But because of this light threat, or because of the fact that we didn't get anywhere when we reported the mold, which is a health issue, we thought, well, they're obviously not going to do anything about the heat. So we just left it. and just suffered through the winter. It wasn't until a few months later that the other storage heater broke in the room that we used for work from home. And then I decided this is enough. So contacted the estate agent again. They got me in touch with an electrician. I think it was about 3 weeks before I heard anything. And I had to remind them about it again. Electrician contacted me to say that there was no storage heaters in Ireland, that there is a massive shortage. So it was impossible to get anything. It was at that point then that I contacted Threshold just to see what my rights and stuff were, because I just kind of had enough at this stage. And yeah, they helped me devise an email. I sent that off to the estate agent, and I kid you not, within 2 hours, I got a message from the electrician saying, "Oh, found two." So they installed it that evening. So we had heat, which was great.
For an extraordinarily cheesy question, because one of the things I kind of brought up earlier was kind of that power imbalance between landlord and tenant. So how did that kind of make you feel, being the very cheesiest question going?
It makes you feel like a second-class citizen a lot of the time. And I don't know how many other renters feel that way, but you just kind of feel like it's not your home. And I know Threshold are very much promoting like a home is a home, no matter if you buy, rent, live with your parents. But it never really feels like a home, because if that happened, if I owned the apartment that happened, you just get it fixed. You know, it's your responsibility. You're not going to do that when you're renting, because it's not. You're already paying a huge amount of rent. And then as well as that, you know, you're not allowed to hang pictures on the wall. You're not allowed to put up a curtain rail. You're not allowed to paint the wall. So you never get to really personalize. Now, obviously that's not the case for everyone. People have really sound landlords that will let them do that, but not everyone does. And it kind of makes you feel you're stuck. Sorry, I'm not crying. My voice went. You're stuck in their home, and you can never really make it your home, basically. So I always felt that I was at home, but I wasn't really at home.
Would you be able to just kind of describe towards the end of your tenancy and also kind of the aspect regarding getting the deposit back?
Yeah, so we technically broke a fixed term lease, which we didn't know was a fixed term. When we wanted to end the tenancy, we were told that we had to get a replacement in ourselves if we wanted our deposit back. So they advertised it online. We held the viewings and cleaned all the mold. Can't let anyone see that. And we found someone, which was great. We agreed on a date, which was when the rent ended, like midnight on the 31st of January. And that day, the afternoon of the 31st, the estate agent came to do a walkthrough. And in the communications leading up to that, they had said, if you wouldn't mind just cleaning the apartment. And I said, yeah, no problem. I'll have it spick and span. Literally my words. And then when they arrived, they were like, oh, I've never actually been spoken to like that before. It was crazy. It was like, how do you expect someone to move in here? This place is like destroyed. And I was like, what? Like, we had spent the last 3 days like on our hands and knees scrubbing behind skirting boards, like everything. It was spotless, like honestly. And I was told that it was like unlivable conditions. And they said that, you know, the other tenants were around the corner waiting to move in. They couldn't let them move in. They went around like this. They were like, this is disgraceful. And
yeah,
I was like, so they had said, we expected you to get it professionally cleaned, but you had said spick and span. So we assumed that you'd get it professionally cleaned. Like, that's, to me, in my books, that's not what that means. But so they said they had a phone call with a cleaning company. The cleaning company on the phone said that it would cost about €500 to get the place really deep cleaned, and that would have to come out of our deposit. It was yeah, I just wanted to get out of there at that stage. So I was like, just email me the details. I really don't care at this stage. So we left, and then I contacted Threshold again, because after thinking about it for a while, I was like, €500 for cleaning. Like, I wouldn't even pay that for my car getting valet. And then Threshold said, you know, ask for a receipt of the payment. And once I did that, then conveniently, it was only €80 to get cleaned. So I promptly received the deposit less the 80.
So kind of two more questions for you. So one is kind of like, well, if it's not too personal, but what do you kind of see your future in the next couple of years regarding, well, one of the questions we asked regarding aspirations and expectations. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time?
Now, it really feels like a job interview. In the next 5 years, I would like to own my own home. I am a single applicant, so it will be a lot more difficult, but I was chatting to the minister, and there are a lot of options that seem very daunting, but yeah, hopefully, I mean, I would like to own. If not, I do see myself moving abroad. If I can't buy in Ireland in the next few years, I think I will probably move abroad. It seems to be a lot easier from a lot of my friends doing so. So hopefully I don't have to go that route though, because I do like
Fingers
it.
crossed yourself. But so one of the things that kind of really struck me, but kind of everyone in the office, kind of when we heard about your story of just like you come across as very independent and successful, but even kind of with all those attributes, renting can make you feel extremely vulnerable. So the last question I just have for you, kind of similar to one of the questions we ask the applicants, is what would you do to improve renting in Ireland?
Improve renting in Ireland. I would definitely have lower rental costs. Absolutely. If I was to rent that place on my own, it would have been, with bills, it would have been 90% of my wage, which is crazy. But I'd also have some sort of approval process type thing, like inspection. So, you know, when you buy a house, you get your snag done and you get all the bits checked. I think something like that is needed. If you're going to list a property for rent, you have to be registered, first of all, and then you also have to go through this sanity check. And
like an NCT for housing?
Like an NCT for housing.
Sorry, I had to throw them there somewhere.
Like an NCT for house, yeah. I think those two, a combination of those two, I think would solve my experience anyway.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Sarah, and thank you very much for agreeing to this. It's not terribly easy. But thank you.
Thanks a million, Sarah. Yeah, and I'm sure plenty of us can all identify with Sarah's experience and empathise with it. So yes, unfortunately, the Minister has to get over to the Dole. So important work, so we'll let him go.
Thank you. Thanks again, Sarah.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Now we'll have our Q&A. So anybody in the room keen to jump in there with a question? We have mics anyway if anyone needs, but I suppose it is a small enough space. While you're thinking of your questions, so I have received some online. So this probably was directed to the Minister, but we should be able to answer it. What kind of reception has the proposed bill to reduce short-term lets been getting from other EU partners, and what is the anticipated timescale for implementation? So just as a teeny bit of background, Threshold's been campaigning for quite some years to have short-term lets regulated, because we saw a trend of long-term rental homes being let out as holiday lets. So it was taking homes out of the long-term housing sector. So the government does have a bill in place to regulate those, to try and bring as many of those back into long-term use as possible. And that bill, it was hoped it would actually pass through the Oireachtas and be commenced before the summer recess. But the EU Commission has decided that it will do regulations throughout the EU. And I'm looking at Gareth and Zach, and if I get any of this wrong, please correct me, because it's taken me a little while to get my head around how the EU process interacts with our own legislative process. But the EU have put a pause on Ireland taking its action, and they've actually paused that until at least December, which was quite disappointing, and it's been quite frustrating. But there is, I have been told, activity going on between our government and the EU Commission to try and have our own legislation advanced here in Ireland while the EU decide what they want to do at the EU level. Best case scenario then would be that we're allowed to progress with our legislation, and then when the EU regulations come in, we adjust ours if there's anything significantly at odds with the EU regulations. As regards timeline, we don't know, unfortunately. But as I said, December is what the pause has been put on it until December, but I understand that efforts are being made to try and have it advanced prior to that. So that hopefully that helps answer the question for the person who sent in that question. I have a few more here, but I'll check first of all if anyone in the room. No bother. So, and this will probably be for Gareth, I think, the next couple. So, yeah, you had mentioned the tax credit. What did you find out about it in relation to people availing of it? And that's grand, you can look at your notes. Yeah. It's a big report, it's hard to remember everything that's in it.
So Yeah, there was kind of two overarching points regarding the tax credit. One, there was among those who we interviewed, most people basically were aware of the credit, but a majority weren't able to apply for the tax credit. But there were a series of reasons for why they didn't apply the tax credit, and by far the largest one was actually not being eligible, but followed by the second one is didn't know about it, and also didn't know how. But yeah, for those who were already in receipts of all the other housing supports, were not eligible for it. I think that answers the question.
And yeah, I guess from ourselves in Threshold, we have been trying to make people aware of it, make them aware that they're eligible, make them aware how to apply for it. So if you do know anyone who needs to apply for it, tell them to get in touch, and we'll guide them as best we can. And then another question: what type of people go to Threshold, or who are the people who took part in the survey? So again, I think Gareth again there.
Well, there kind of were people from all kind of age cohorts. It wasn't necessarily a weighted sample. So kind of just, for example, people who are traditionally seen as young adults mightn't be as a weighted percentage of the population, but there were a kind of varied responses from all sorts of age cohorts, and also kind of coming out when outlining kind of some of the case studies and examples. I did my best to kind of make sure we had people from all across Ireland, of all different kind of family sizes, socioeconomic backgrounds, and so on.
Cool. So this one now, I'm not sure. I think. Well, we'll see who can answer this one. So how is affordable housing defined? And the person who sent in this question just also followed up just to say, my partner and I both work full-time, make well over minimum wage, and we can't afford a one-bed apartment where we live. So the affordable housing, do you want to?
I just remember it's there, but I actually don't remember the definition. But it isn't there. I think it's written in the preamble somewhere.
Yeah, and so when we do the rent to income affordability, that's usually taken as a measure of as long as you're spending, if you spend 30% or less of your income on rent, that's deemed to be affordable. Now that is a crude enough measure, and there are some more nuanced variations of that. And what we are seeing is a lot of people then who are renting are paying well above 30%, as we saw in the people surveyed, well above 30% of their income on rent. So it's deemed to be unaffordable. When it comes to then affordable housing schemes, those are schemes that are delivered through government, and that's where they will meet part of the cost. There's a number of different ones. One is where they'll meet part of the deposit cost to get you to the point where you can access the mortgage. Then there's shared equity and a couple of different ones like that. So they'd have various different measures within those schemes to determine affordability. So then I don't see any hands on the floor. I'm very shy. But luckily people online are throwing in the questions. So the right to housing is in the recommendations. What would this do for housing in Ireland? So yeah, good question. Big question. How long do you have? So the right to housing, that is something the Threshold believes in and its values, and has been campaigning for a referendum on the right to housing for some time. So at present, our constitution contains nothing in relation to a home or a right to housing. And the constitution is there to direct government on what its duties and obligations are to the people. So yes, while plenty of governments, and this current government, are committed to delivering housing, there's nothing there to ensure that they do that. There's nothing there to ensure that everybody has access to adequate housing. And by placing a right to housing in the constitution, it would place an onus on them, no matter their political leanings, their preferences, or political ideologies, that housing is something that is really valued by the people of Ireland, and that the government has an obligation to deliver. Threshold is part of Home for Good, and that coalition has put forward a wording which recognises the UN definition of adequate housing. So that has to mean it's affordable, it meets your needs, it's accessible, it's culturally appropriate, and also that wording we've put forward as would ensure that government use its available resources to meet the housing need. So housing, a right to housing it's an incremental right. It's something that's done over time. But by putting the right to housing in the Constitution, it would be the first step in ensuring that we solve and avoid future housing crises. So it's been around. Do you have a mic? Yeah.
So yeah, just a little additional recommendation is if you go onto the Home for Good website, there's actually a link to a paper from, I think, from the Oireachtas Library that kind of goes back through a series of different pieces of legislation. I think there's about 18 in total, dating back from 2009, highlighting basically many disparate pieces of legislation that were deemed unconstitutional by the Attorney General, and some of these actually range from kind of ending no-fault evictions to some of them actually basically referring to relief for kind of mortgage holders, which kind of shows you how the right for housing is not necessarily just for those who are renting, but it's also those who actually own their own home via mortgage as well. So I definitely recommend having a look through that, and I'll give you examples of what could have been if or what can be if the right to housing is implemented in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Sorry, Anne-Marie, unfortunately I have a microphone as well.
This is our legal officer.
Yeah, and I'm big on constitutional rights, but I just want to say that, when I started studying law, South Africa had a limited right to housing in their constitution. It was incredibly progressive at the time, and the scale of the housing crisis they were dealing with across townships and other issues was massive compared to ours. But the key thing to understand, I think, with a constitutional right to housing is a balancing that it brings into perspective against private property rights, but also that it's a springboard for the realization of all kinds of other socioeconomic rights and human rights. So it's not a silver bullet, it's not a panacea, whatever term you want to use, but it's critically important, and we'd like to see as much progress on this issue from whichever government we have in this country, but as quickly as possible, because it's vitally needed.
Yeah, thanks very much, Zach. Yeah, and it's worth saying the Housing Commission is examining this issue, and the government have committed to a referendum on housing. So that is something that we're keeping engaged with them on. So I think we're coming up possibly to our last one or two questions. I'm conscious of the time. And this is Sarah might be able to contribute to this question. So it is, how knowledgeable were people about their tenants' rights before accessing threshold services? Would you say many were unaware? So I guess, yeah, for yourself, Sarah, in the first instance, what was that like for you? Were you aware of your rights, and how did you feel now after being in touch with Threshold?
I was not aware. I actually didn't even hear of Threshold before a friend recommended them to me. And when I was telling my friends that I was going to this today, they were like, what's Threshold? I was like, come on. So I don't think a lot of people, and especially people that might be coming into Ireland that are renting, I definitely don't think that they're aware of their rights, because when I was musing around whether to rent again, there was so many bed shares and so many room shares. Like it's a crazy world out there, is all I'll say. So I definitely, and people are accepting that as the norm. So I definitely don't think everyone is aware of their rights at all.
Okay, thank you. We'll have to get on to our advertising team. We need it. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. Oh, do you want to give a mic to this lady? Yeah.
I do think you do very good work, and is it on?
Yeah, so it's for our online audience. So,
yeah. So okay. I just think you do great work, and I hope that word gets out if people aren't aware. And just a tiny little, when I was coming today, as I came out of my house, just to bring everything kind of to reality, there was a big group of people, and I thought maybe there'd been a fire in a little apartment or something. I didn't know. So I asked, was there something wrong? So I live in Dublin 1 in a little cul-de-sac, and there's a house just gone for sale. So the queue was to view the house. So just a little tangible awareness of how real the issue is. But anyway, I thank God it was a sunny day, and I felt like bringing them all out a glass of water. But anyway, thanks for all the work that you do.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Thank you. I think we'll have time for one more. this is an interesting one. What happens if a landlord lives abroad and doesn't have their property registered for the RTVA revenue, and I try to claim the rent relief of €500? So from what we understand, the tax credit is there to benefit renters. It's a cost of living measure, and the information that is supplied by the renter on the form online is not going to be used to pursue the landlord. It's not going to be used to. So that's one thing that we are hearing from people. They're worried. Oh, if the landlord's not registered, what if they find out? Will I get in trouble? From what we understand, this is very much a cost of living measure. This is not about going after landlords. And the message is apply for it, avail of that credit. But if anyone, who is in attendance wants to get in touch with us about that, they can, and kind of talk that through, because we understand people are worried, would have a nervousness. But in addition to that, you are protected by the Act from punitive action by your landlord. If you're worried they're going to kick you out because of this, they have to have certain grounds to do that. So there's a whole raft of protections there, and Threshold is there to help you assert your rights, own your rights, and to make sure that you can stay in your home. So unless there's anybody else in the room who wants to jump in, I think we can wrap it up there. I'd like to say thanks a million to everybody who's attended here today and online. We really hope that you've taken something valuable from today. We hope that you do look at the report, even if you only look at the top line figures, read the quotes from people. They really get across the experience, and have a look at our recommendations. And if you do need Threshold's assistance, we have our free phone, we have our web chat online. There's multiple ways you can get in touch with us. So I just want to thank you to the whole team for working on the report and getting us here today. And thanks a million as well to Sarah for sharing her experience with us. So thank you.